So I have a slight addiction to Facebook Marketplace, and I found this really strange looking recumbent bike. I think that's what it is. And my first thoughts were, I absolutely hate it. And so I bought it. So it uses 2 hand levers to turn, and it's almost like more of a crab walk when you're driving it. Feels kind of like you're gliding. It's a really interesting drive. It's got the pedals with the little crank set on there, which is kind of cool, which will help us out. But we don't use pedals around here, so let's put a motor on it. I am choosing to use the 79cc Predator engine from Harbor Freight, and for the clutch I'm just going to be using a torque converter. This is a cheapo Amazon one, but hopefully it does the trick. My initial thought was I could just slap the engine between my legs and the front wheel, but once you sit down you realize this is a terrible idea because the exhaust is pointing straight to your junk. Instead, I think the best plan of action will just be putting that sucker on the back of the bike, but putting it way back here also creates the problem of having to have a really long chain and probably a jack shaft, but there's not much else we can do about that. So I'm gonna go look for an engine plate and then we can set everything up afterwards. So, I don't know, I had this bit in my head that I thought it'd be funny if I was just finding parts in random places, and then, I kind of watched it back and I said, wow, this is really stupid. Anyway, here we are. This is the plate that bolts onto the 79cc Predator, and I didn't cut these holes out correctly. Not a big deal, just kind of a waste of steel, but I had to recut a new one out. Awesome. Sweet. To raise the engine plate, I'm going to slap a little bit of a bend to the end of it. And then to account for this bolt that's holding the frame together, I went ahead and drilled out a hole on the engine bracket. And there you have it, a beautiful hole. Unfortunately, the hole was a little bit off. The engine mount was hitting part of the frame that goes up, so it was teetering. Anyway, so I decided a new direction was to just rebend that bottom flange, and then I can just weld the engine plate to the side of this cross member. So I just redid like this part of my yard right here and made it all pretty. And of course, one of the neighborhood cats just left the absolute steamiest, like McDonald's fish sandwich, soft serve turd I've ever seen. So I'm pretty sure they're just trying to send a message, little asshole. Anyway, so I weld on the engine plate. Also, I need to make room for the engine gas tank, so I have to kind of mess around with the seat support. You guys ever do the old bolt trick? So if you have 2 joints that are way too far off, you just gap it with a sacrificial bolt. Works every time. And voila, job done. I'm bending this tube to be a support for underneath the engine mount. But it's so fun using that little torch because you can just bend anything and it's really cool. Alright, yeah, I think that'll be nice and sturdy. If you guys were at Disneyland and the welds for the roller coaster looked like this, would you still ride it? Alright, so I'm going to switch gears real quick, and I'm going to mount the sprocket on the front wheel, figure out how I'm going to do that jack shaft. So let me take off the front wheel and see what we can do. This is a pretty cool assembly I got from Amazon. This is for any bike with a 1¼ inch hub, and they're super easy to mount, and I've never really had any issues with these kind of sprocket mounts before. There is a little snap ring in there. I don't have the proper tools. And if you're asking, yes, the pedals in the front are on a freewheel system. So when you're using the motor, you don't have to pedal to keep up. So we kind of lucked out. I was worried I would have to cut the frame, but there's about a 1/4 inch clearance, so I think we're good. I also had to take the brakes off because the chain will be right in that same spot. And then the chain will come from back there to there, and then from there to there. Yeah, again, finding parts in random places. Pure comedy genius. So once I had the brackets, all I had to do was clean up the frame a little bit and then weld them on. Something like that, I guess. Where's my glove? Survey. Get him outside. Frick. I'm out of welding wire. Hate that. When you get in the garage, you have all this momentum and motivation to work on something, and then you run out of wire or discs or drill bits. So the bearing housing needs to be offset a little bit. So I made this little bracket, and then I'll weld this right here. Okay, where is my welding triangle? Scanning. Oh, hey, I found the glove. Shoot, I welded it backwards. No, I'm just kidding. So with that, it's pretty straightforward. I just tack everything together and then bolt on the bearings. All right, I got the bearings on there. Now I gotta find a shaft that'll go through. 95% of the time I'm in the garage just looking for crap. There. Oh yeah, there we go. That's what I needed. That's for the jack shaft. So we got a 12 tooth. I think this is a 14 tooth. Want that. And we got another one. Piece of shirt. I put the chain on there. I had to use a little half link, but I think it's perfect. Good news is everything lines up great and it doesn't want to fall off. All right, so this is the part that I kind of been dreading to deal with. The sprocket is pretty much exactly in line with this crossbar. I think what I'll do is just cut that completely out. I'm gonna make my own cross member, and then I'll make another support that kind of goes over. So it's basically just boxing this out. I'm gonna test cut this first. Perfect.
Damn, you a dumb sumbitch.
I'm such an idiot. I think it just needs to be the same. For some reason, I thought it had to be this angle subtract 90. Good thing I did a practice cut. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know why. All right, let's try this again real quick. 28 point, what was it? 28 and a half. Oh, there we go. Now we got it. Do the real deal then. And now this bottom part needs to be cut out and then redone as well. There's usually this guide thing on the saw, but I lost it and I'm not sure where it's at. I guess that's the definition of lost. But yeah, so this happens more often because of that. Well, I think it was time for a new blade anyway, and these new blades cut like butter. And I guess I'm having a stroke here because I don't know what I'm doing. Moving on, I cut up some more square tubing to complete this new frame setup. There it is. Very, I don't know. It looks kind of white trash, but not at the same time. All I know is it'll work. I also gusseted the bottom part here, so that sucker is rock solid. Let's line up the chain and see how good we did or how bad. Sorry, wait, hold on. But the chain lined up fine from the previous scene. I guess I just didn't record anything. So I just bought like a cheap Amazon go-kart brake. But I guarantee it'll be better than these little pad brakes. So I could only find one of these suckers for a 1-inch shaft. So we're gonna have to use a shaft adapter. Nice, check that out. It took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that this bracket slides into the brake mechanism. Okay, yeah, that's pretty bad. Kind of funny though. I was looking at YouTube videos. I was looking at the ad that I bought it from. You know, it was probably in the instruction manual that I'm using as a spacer. Maybe I should have read it. Hey, wait a second. Does my old engine mount? Nope, not at all. Worth a try. So the plan is to make a nice thick bracket that kind of bends over. I'm going to make it out of 1/4 inch thick steel. These little spring washers in between for spacing and for whatever, you know, retention. So those are, that's some pretty beefy brakes for this thing. Just on the agenda, we'll be removing the governor. Again, as per my own fault, this actually became a much bigger job than I was hoping for. So removing the governor is pretty simple. The reason you do it is so that you can reach the full RPM of the motor. So there's a little gear back here that has some prawls that fly out at certain RPMs, and then that slows down the motor. So we just remove that and then plug the hole. Unfortunately, in my case, I broke the gasket, so I had to make up my own, which is just a pain in the butt. Just a little tip, if you guys are nuts deep into a governor delete, be sure to open the valve cover and make sure that your rods are lined up and everything is good. Otherwise, your engine's not going to start. Off camera, I cleaned up the gasket on the outside, and then it was time to move on to the throttle. The throttle was a lot more difficult than I thought it would be. Usually the 212s come with more like of a better interface to put a cable on, but the 79cc is not really, so I had to completely customize this one. And it's also half German. For this next part, I don't even want to talk about it. This was the biggest mistake of the whole project. So I had to put a sleeve onto the 5/8 inch shaft of the motor so that the 3/4 inch torque converter can fit on there. And then since it didn't easily slide on, I started hammering it, and that was it. I used heat, I used leverage, I prayed to Harbor Freight, but there was no way this thing was coming off. I've tried everything to try to get this thing unlodged. It is just not budging at all. So I kind of went all in, and I tried to shave the inside of the shaft where the belt drive didn't reach yet so that I could hammer it all the way on. All right, so I finally got the torque converter on. This was seriously such a disaster. There's no way this back plate is coming off. So pretty much this is all, that sucks. I almost don't want to put this in the video. That's embarrassing. And this belt doesn't line up because I put this too far back without the spacer. So that's a fail. That's a major fail. Well, the one thing that kind of sucks is that this trike is not street legal. One thing about this trike that's super cool is it's even street legal. So let's take it for a test ride. Steer on a dime.
The steering is so sensitive when you're going fast.
We're opening her up. Oh, okay. I think that's enough.
I wonder how much of a tool I look like.